Thank you for tuning in to the Stories That Bind Us. We host open and honest conversations about personal experiences which can include sensitive topics such as identity, emotional struggles, mental health, and life challenges. Some of these discussions may be sensitive or difficult for certain viewers. This content is intended to encourage reflection, growth, and meaningful dialogue. So instead of cutting or censoring our episodes, we present them in their entirety. Thank you for being here and engaging with these important conversations. Viewer discretion is advised.
Well, we're good. Are you good?
I'm good.
All right. So we're just going to chat. We're just going to go for it.
Okay.
So the Stories That Bind Us is the name of what we're doing. It's the podcast we put together. And it's really, when we were talking before, it's an opportunity to just sit down, have an honest conversation, share like a lot of us don't anymore because of social media and busy lives and all the things that we do. We don't necessarily have the time to just sit down, sit on the couch, and talk about what's really going on in life and have the conversations that connect us together, that bind us. And basically that just means being real. And that means talking about the things that have happened in life that have gotten us where we are, good and bad, and just having that honest conversation that connects us together. And that was the purpose of doing this. And it was really why I wanted to sit down with you, because I know you have an interesting story. And the cool thing is when we face adversity and the things that we've dealt with in life and the things that have challenged us, and then the good things that have come out of that, or the good things that we've experienced as well, it helps us grow. It helps us connect with people because we understand life in a different way and we understand each other in a different way. So that's the purpose, and I'm glad you're willing to join me.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So welcome to the Stories That Bind Us. This is my friend James, and we're going to just chat it up and see where this thing goes. Good?
Yeah.
So let's talk about your story. Let's talk about the things that you would say have shaped you into the man you've become.
Mm-hmm. Through the trials and the fires first.
Absolutely.
That's they're always through those. But so I'm an Army brat. My father was in the military. We're talking about that's how I became a Steelers fan, and I became really good at fitting in. I was a chameleon. Wherever we lived, whether it was Arizona, Belgium, Germany, I could fit in anywhere, right? Which is a superpower. But it wasn't until later that I learned that I never felt like I belonged. So I didn't have a sense of me. I had a sense of appropriating whatever was wherever I lived, So I got really good at fitting in. And so somewhere along the line, I developed this lying belief, I call it, that I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, because everywhere I went, no matter what happened in the last place, I've got to now work to fit in. And so I describe it as prove energy. This energy everywhere I went was about taking on things, doing things to prove, number one, I'm good enough or I'm worthy. And no one ever told me that I wasn't. That was a story that I developed because of that, moving around. So I think everything, success, stress, all came from that kind of what I call the lying belief of I'm not good enough.
Yeah, that's hard. How long did that last? When did you finally face that and come to that understanding?
Well, I'll tell you when it's fully over because it's still in my muscle memory. But probably when I got into coaching about 5 years ago, when I started to do my own internal work, more from a place of being and less doing, because everything before was about doing. And the interesting thing was I would take on bigger assignments, bigger things, never celebrate them, move on to the next thing. And when I would be overwhelmed and when I would fail at some of those things, I would just prove to myself, guess what? I'm not good enough. So it became this self-fulfilling prophecy, right? So as I got into coaching and kind of helping other people, I also was on my own journey of really understanding it's really more about me being and belonging than doing. And I think that's still layers of surrender that I'm working on to this day.
Yeah, that's a long process for a lot of us. And I relate what you're saying, because when you're trying to prove yourself by doing things and having to achieve things to have validation or self-worth, it can become this never-ending cycle because you do have failures, or even the successes, like you said, you didn't even celebrate those. You just go to the next thing. So talk about what it was like growing up, because you're moving around, you're doing the keep trying to prove yourself method, and you're having to reinvent yourself, I would think, over and over as you move from place to place, culture to culture.
every 3 years. Like I lived in Fort Huachuca, Arizona in 5th grade, moved to West Point, New York. So totally different part of the country, living at a military academy, which was its own kind of environment. And then it was, okay, what's everybody listen to music-wise? Oh, it's Kiss and it's Rush and it's all these things. Well, we didn't listen to that in the last place. And everybody wears Levi jeans and Nike like literally needing to appropriate what was cool, right? And so then from there, I moved to Paris and then to Germany. So each place had its own totally different culture. And the other thing is I was usually the only black person everywhere I went. So that was a whole nother dynamic. I never saw anybody that looked like me, yet I was trying to fit in with people that didn't have really anything in common with me other than they lived in a place. And so what the coping mechanism I developed to really fit in was basketball. I was really good at basketball. So when I would get to the new school in the middle of the year, didn't know anybody, but everybody else already knew each other, at recess, I went to the basketball court. And as soon as I could prove myself there, I was in. And then became the transformation of fitting in to belong like everybody else. And I don't think I realized it until probably I was 52, that everywhere I went, I was really good at fitting in as a superpower, but I was never really coming from myself. I didn't really know myself. And I was a believer all my life, but I would say I was never discipled. I didn't know what it looked like to really live and understand my true identity in Christ. I didn't have that. My identity was in whatever environment I was in. And so as I really look back, I think about things that didn't work well because, and I never really felt seen or heard or known. While I wasn't really putting myself out to be seen or heard or known, I was really just copycatting everything else around me, But it was out of survival. So I don't think I realized any issue with it until I kind of got to this side of things and really started to see the stress and the burnout. And no matter what I did, I was never really satisfied or fulfilled.
Well, those are all, that's a journey that you had to jump through a lot of different hoops in a lot of different places just to feel like you were part of it. So what did that do for your psyche? Especially, you couldn't have fit into every group you wanted and every friendship couldn't have been amazing. Like, how did that go down for you?
Yeah, it was all about performance, right? I learned to perform really well. So what I learned to do, because again, we would get plucked out in the middle of a school year and drop into a school year in February, right? And everything had already gelled and people. So I got really good at coming into a new place, stepping back and observing the landscape. Who are the cool kids? Who are the burnouts? That's a term we used back in the day, right? Who are the kids that, did different things and kind of find my place. Again, there weren't many people that looked like me, so that wasn't an obvious thing. But it was always through sports. It was always through basketball typically. And I'd kind of find out who those people were and start to align myself and then start to conform to the things that they did. And that became the identity that I took on. And I was good. And I never really, during those times, if I think about it, I never thought of it as a problem. It wasn't until I got out into the real world and grew up and there isn't like a peer group that I realized, oh, who am I, right? I'm spending all my time trying to be like other people to prove that I'm good enough to people who never said I wasn't good enough. That was my own kind of lying belief that I had.
Yeah, it's that voice talking to you. So you go through all this and you just are living life, feeling good. Mm-hmm. Challenges come up. You just adjust and adapt, do what you got to do to succeed, because you got to build those accolades, you got to build up those relationships where people see you as that guy. Kind of battle the voice that's telling you you're not good enough and all the things that we have to overcome internally. So what was the change? You alluded to 5 years ago, you start going into coaching and helping others, and so you have to now self-reflect and you have to put into practice what you're going to teach other people and coach them on. So how did you get to that point? What did that reveal in you?
One thing I learned is it's so much easier to tell people and not do it yourself. You know how that works. But my story was the last company I worked with, I'd been there for 4 years and I had a boss that we started on the same day. And for the first 2 years of that 4 years, everything was great. Then we moved from Scottsdale to Connecticut, different culture, different environment. And all of a sudden there was this tension between he and I, to the point where he was the kind of leader that would give individual feedback in a meeting of other people, like his own peers. And he sat at the executive level of the company. So we would be in meetings and he would give me feedback on whatever performance we were talking about projects as if we were sitting one-on-one in his office. And I remember after that meeting going to his office and shutting the door and said, I'm okay with feedback. Like I like to grow and learn, but that has to happen in private. And he didn't understand that. He just kind of continued to justify why that would happen. And so we had this really long conversation. And somewhere through the conversation, he described what success looked like for him in this moment of time. And I felt released because I realized I'm never going to be that person and I don't want to be that person. That I literally felt like a shift, a lifting off my shoulders as he talked. And it's like I knew the secret that he didn't know. And he kept talking about all the things I needed to do. And I was kind of set free, like, this is never going to work here because the person I am never wants to be that person. That was kind of a defining moment for me. So I knew at that time, it was like April of 2019. I knew by the end of the year I needed to move back to Phoenix and get on to do something different. 2 weeks later, we're in his office having the exact same conversation. Except now I know what the problem is. It's not that I need to change or do something. It's this is no longer the environment for me. So he and I are having this conversation, and somewhere through the end of the conversation, he was exhausted. He had spoken everything because I wasn't fighting with him because I knew what the issue was. And he said, hey, it feels like where we are now no longer fits what excites you and lights you up. And I think this was now, he went from like boss to like coach, right? And he said, I think maybe this is the opportunity for you to find something that really excites you and lights you up, like around people and development. You're always excited about those things, less so about the technical things of what we do. He says, that makes sense? I said, absolutely. He said, would you like me to help you transition from the company, right, and exit gracefully with a package or whatever that looks like so you can do that? I said, yeah. So I kind of knew what it was, didn't know when it would happen, and it happened faster. From that day on, our relationship changed. He became a person of support and encouragement, and it was probably 2 months later that I exited and came back. And so that was kind of that defining moment. And then I was meeting with a coach who was helping me transition when I got back here, and he said, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I've done this work for 25 years. I want to do something that more closely aligns to who I am and what I'm about. He said, what is that? And I said, probably executive recruiting. Because I had really good relationships with recruiters the whole time I was, working in corporate, and it's all about relationship building and things like that. And he said, okay. And that Saturday I went to a Zumba class in Scottsdale. I go to that same class today, like 10 years later, and I met a lady who was an executive recruiter. 3 days later, her name is Sylvia, and I find out that's what she's doing. 7 days later, I went to work with Sylvia. So it was one of those things where I learned, like, oh, when you make a decision and you declare something, the provision shows up, right? So I meet Sylvia. I go to work with her for a year as a recruiter. They didn't teach us how to do sales. I knew how to help talk to people and coach people. So that's what I did. That was right before the pandemic, and therefore people weren't hiring after a while. And then someone else I knew said, hey, you ought to think about doing coaching. Never considered it. And after she spoke that to me, every email I got, every voice message, everything I got was about about coaching. And so I call this coaching thing a calling, because it's more aligned to who I am. And I felt like God was really leading me to this, not something I chose to do. And so then from there, I developed my company On Purpose Life, helping people live their life in purpose, on purpose, I call it. So they never work another day in their life. And what I recognized through a series of events is that when you understand your identity and it's expressed through your purpose and you walk that out in confidence, all the things you need to fulfill that show up and overtake you in your life, right? Matthew 6:33 is the scripture. Seek first the kingdom and all the things will be added to you. And that's what I have done for the last 6 years. That's what I help others do that are very successful, but really stressed out and bogged down because they're in that same rat race that I was in around proving.
Yeah. And that's important that you've connected those dots internally so that you can help others come to that same conclusion, or at least address them like you did with the boss that you were kind of coming into that place of conflict with. You recognized that this wasn't comfortable, and there's many people that have had that experience, myself included, where you just take it because it's part of the job or it's
Right.
part of the owner or the boss, and you had enough self-worth to have a conversation with them and share something that was important for him to find out as well, because he wasn't being a good leader.
No, he wasn't.
And for him to come to that conclusion within weeks that it really wasn't you that was the problem, it was the fit. It was for what he was wanting you to do and his leadership style. So it's interesting that you kind of went down that journey, but I think a lot of the key was that you were willing to face the problem first and foremost, instead of just take it, go home and kick the dog and drink your troubles away, or whatever vice you would have used to just avoid the conflict. So, I mean, that's a huge step. Yeah. And so I don't want to overlook that, because a lot of people are afraid to take that step and look in the mirror and say, I'm worth more than having somebody treat me that way.
Absolutely. And the thread, I'll tell you, if I think about today, if I look back 6 years ago, the thread was a surrender at that time. Not a giving up surrender, but surrendering to accepting the situation for it is what it is. And I've learned that acceptance doesn't mean agreement. It doesn't mean I agreed with his approach, but I accepted this is what it is. And once I accepted that is when I felt released from that assignment, knowing that he's not my source and provider anyway, he's just my boss, right? And when I moved into that space, all the other things started to happen. Like his conversation changed, the way I left changed, the way I found the next job and the next job, those things all just showed up. Never did I have a plan or something. I've just kind of allowed things to flow toward me based on honestly working out from my identity and my purpose, which is what I end up helping people do. Many people I work with are very successful. They create a lot of things in life and a lot of titles and companies. And at the same time, there's a sense of they've sacrificed so much to do that they're dying inside. And when we go deep, I usually find what their lying belief is. And it sounds like, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not safe enough, I'm not lovable enough. That's what's actually driving them for the success they've got, to the point where it no longer works, because that becomes the limiting factor. And so again, that's why I'm in the place to kind of work with those folks to help them really get clear on their identity and their purpose and make different choices in their life to continue what I call from success to significance. You and I talked about legacy, right? 7 generations, 1,000 years. Like, what does that look like versus the things of today?
Yeah, well, it's where you're investing your time and your resource and the energy that we have, that we're investing into whatever endeavor. Like you referred to these folks that are highly successful in certain aspects of their life, financially, or the titles or the companies or whatever they're doing. And a lot of us fall into those traps where we're investing all this time and energy for this carrot that we're seeking at the end. And I think what you said early on impacts a lot of people, myself included, where you keep striving for this appearance, you keep striving for this acceptance and this desire to belong, and all these things are never good enough because you're chasing after the wrong God. And acceptance, if you're chasing after the God of the Bible, the acceptance is already there. You just have to receive it. Like you came to that point and said, all right, what is it that I need to do for me, and who am I, and why does this not settle? And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's kind of what I'm understanding from your story, is how you got to this place and said, I can do better, I can be better, and there's more to life. And then you look to the scriptures and you look to, what God had said. So if someone's in that place right now where they got a bad boss, or they have these places in their life that they're striving and it's just not working and coming together, what's your advice? Yeah,
it's funny because I used to think that those like red flags, the tension when something like that's going on, are a warning, stay away from. But now I see it as an invitation to go deeper. Because to your point, it has nothing to do with external circumstances. It's always an inside job. It doesn't have to do with the money, the cars, the boats, the houses, the titles, the thing. None of those things change the inside. And many people chase after them thinking, it's called be, do, have. Once I have all the things, time, money, energy, family, then I can start doing the things that make me happy. Then I'll actually be happy, satisfied, fulfilled. And what we learn is that never works. You never have or do enough. It actually comes from a place of being. So conversations I'm having today with people are, who do you need to be or become in order for that to be reality? Not what do you have to do. It's a different language. And to your point, the other revelation I had was that this void that I have can only be filled by God. So there's 4 things that only can come from God and not from anybody else. Acceptance, which you said, security, identity, and purpose. And those 4 things have to come this way. And if you look for those anywhere this way, through spouses or relationships or work, it's never enough because it was never designed to totally fulfill me. And that's the other thing through this journey over the last 10 years, gotten deeper into faith as a place to be satisfied and at peace. And therefore my being has changed and my doing has changed. And the things that I today have, they come much more easily. Like that's, honestly, scripture is a lot of where I learned the principles that apply to anybody, regardless of the faith.
But coming to that place requires what you said early on, is that surrender. Not giving up, but accepting. And like you said, I like your point that just because you accept something doesn't mean you agree with it. You just acknowledge the reality of the situation. And, I've heard it said that reality is our friend. Facts really do make the most difference when you're willing to face them. And then you have a decision to make.
Bingo.
Now,
Yeah.
And that's what you did. You had a conversation early on that determined that this wasn't a good fit and helped your boss, which, man, kudos to him that he came to that understanding after a difficult conversation 2 weeks later. He came to the same understanding, and he at least cared enough about you, whatever turned in him, that it wasn't, let me tell you what you need to do because I'm the boss. It's like he at least recognized that you weren't in the right role anymore, and that something had shifted. And that's a pivotal moment for him, I think, as well, in some ways, because it made him a better leader at the moment. Now, I don't know what happened. You said that things shifted in your relationship and you left on good terms. I mean, that's a blessing. But if someone's in that place, what I'm hearing you say is, if someone's in that place and they're looking for all these external, anything external to help them find joy and happiness and significance and purpose and acceptance and all those different aspects that you said come from God, and that's how we're wired and how we're created. If they're chasing any of the other things, what would be your advice to them if that's their circumstance?
Yeah, 2 questions. One, to ask themselves. One would be, what am I currently believing that's causing this situation to be true for me? So if I'm experiencing stress or resistance or fear or doubt, what belief do I have that's causing this? The belief might be, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough. Like, there's a belief for which this situation is now triggering, and that's why I feel this emotion. Right? That's the one thing, to get to the root of that. The second question, that's just an awareness piece, right, that gets to identity. The second piece is, who do I need to be or become in order for that reality that I want to take place? Do I need to be more courageous, have more confidence, more joy, more peace? That's not something to happen on the other end. It's a place to start from now. So it's identifying my future self that's already successful, that's already satisfied, all the things I want, that future self is there. How do I be and become that today? Not what do I need to do. It's not what action plan or what book or what hack or what thing do I need to listen to, but who do I need to be from the inside first that will allow me to achieve that?
Yeah, I love that. And I think a way that I would kind of sum that up, or even just in my own mind, describe it to myself, is it's coming to peace with yourself and coming to that place where the core of who you are is going to be, you accept yourself and you do those things that fill your tank, regardless of what the outcome is. That's right. But finding that internal acceptance and joy with who you are, and just knowing that you're true to yourself. Because then it doesn't matter what accolades you get, all those things. A lot of people with resources or successful endeavors or awards or whatever you want to measure success by come to that conclusion at some point in time when they really start doing the introspection, is none of it really is fulfilling. there's an aspect of it that is meaningful. But at the end of the day, you're on your deathbed. You're not saying, give me my Oscar, or let that Oscar lay next to me in my deathbed. Or, I just want to hold my ATM card or something along those lines. It's materialistic. You also said in there when you were discussing about coming to that place where you're asking yourself the two questions. I think the reminder that I'm telling myself again from what you said is you're taking an internal inventory. You're looking at what the life is that you want to accomplish and to have, and then what you're willing to do to get it. But what you're willing to do, and that means the internal work, the way that you treat people, the way that you think about yourself, the way you talk to yourself. That's how I look at that. But it's also not looking to who can help me get there necessarily. Right. Now, and I'm not saying you don't get help, because counseling's important, friends are important, people pouring in to your bucket is important. But I also want to caution that if you're looking for external support, that's different than wanting someone else to do it for you.
Absolutely.
And to be the one that always has to tell you, no, you're good enough, and you're the best, you're whatever, because that's exhausting for others. And no one else wants to sign on to that. All right. So I'm trying to think of what direction I want to go. I want to talk to you about just words of wisdom. Like you're sharing a lot of wisdom, but actually let's talk about your faith. I think that's a lot of what has shaped you, and you said that you've been a believer throughout your life, and that wasn't something that you were really seeking because you already had that faith and belonging. Talk about that aspect. When do you recall coming to a faith that you really felt was something you could own and that could help you just follow the path that you wanted for your life? Like, how did your faith grow over the years, and what were some of the key moments or key things that had happened to kind of help you on your journey and shape that?
Yeah, I would say back when I lived at West Point, when I was like 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, my parents had always grown up and they were Christians, but didn't take us to church, right? But they were wise enough to send us to Sunday school. And so the buses on the post would come pick us up at our homes and take us to Sunday school. And the cadets, the college students, were our teachers, right? So that's where I first came to faith. That's where I was first saved. But because there was no further church or development, today I'd use the words I wasn't discipled. So what I knew how to do was be a good person. Be good, right? Because I didn't know anything else. Like, there's all these good stories, be good. And so through my life, as I think about it, if I knew about faith then what I know today, there's a lot of things I would have chosen to do differently. There's a lot more peace and joy I would have had in the midst of trials, but I didn't know how to do that. I never learned that. So it was probably about 10 years ago, after a previous company I worked for, after 21 years, my job ended. I was also in a very tough time in my marriage at the same time, just a lot of things up in the air. And I was at work that day, and I was on a phone call with a guy that I knew, and I told him about my transition, and he said to me, hey, I'm going to pray for you. And I thought, okay, great. And before we got off the phone, he said, Dear Heavenly Father, and he started praying right away. I was thinking to myself, this guy doesn't know me that well. How can he just be praying for me? We don't even know each other that well. I got off the phone, talked to somebody down the hall, the guy who was replacing me in that role, and he said to me, I told him the story, and he said, I've been praying for you too. And I went, what is this thing going on where people are praying and not telling me about it, right? I didn't know that was a thing. And he said, yeah. So I was like, okay. And then my wife sent me an email from where she used to work. Somebody had sent like a scripture of the day. And the scripture or the lesson that day was, give it up to God in confidence. Surrender, right? So these three things happen at the same time. And I'm like, okay, that's got to be a sign of something. So I went to Barnes & Noble at Santan, and I bought a 365-day Bible. Because when I was in the Army, I had one of those. I'm like, okay, there must be something that's going to help me in this situation. And so I bought that Bible, and then right next to that, I found Rick Warren's Purpose-Driven Life. And so started to read that every day. After about 3 days, I went to Kimberly and said, you got to do this with me. We have to do this together. And so we started walking down through it. And I thought, oh, we'll just do this on our own. We'll figure it out. And I think on day 7 it says, you need to have a church community to walk this out with you. So I was like, okay. So we walked through 42 days of that and learned all things purpose. I've read that book probably 4 or 5 times since. That's why my company is Purpose Driven Life. My license plate says On Purpose Life. It's all about purpose is where I really learned that, and it changed for me. And then we were sitting at Chompy's right here around the corner over by the mall, and we saw a guy that Kimberly used to work with, and they were coming from a men's group. And we were like, hey, what church do you go to? Long story short, we ended up going to that church, and we've been in some type of church community, leading marriage group or men's groups ever since. It's been 10 years. That's where I really learned to be discipled, to disciple others, to pour in, to be poured into, to really understand not how to just understand faith here, but really connect it here and then become hands and feet with it to change reality, mine and others. And that's where it's really come alive in the last 10 years. And most of what I do comes from things I hear on Sunday morning or what I read every morning. Regardless of your belief in faith, the principles are everlasting and evergreen and universal, and they work for anybody. And so that is like the foundation of everything that I do.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's one of the keys that have, as you already know, that's what's driven your success with connecting with people. It's that heart and that passion and the purpose that all have aligned. And so I love that. And I love that you're always willing to give back. You're helping these folks that have achieved a lot of things that you have achieved. They've achieved some material success and some accolades that might be meaningful in people's eyes, where they fit into certain groups, or people like to see them in the room. People wanted to see you on the basketball court, or people wanted to do things where you were fitting in. But there's still that, what you said, there's that piece missing that can't be fulfilled through materialism or accolades, titles, education even, if you're not being educated in the matters of the heart, which is where God hits us and where he talks to us, and which ultimately helps us feel fulfilled or not. And so I appreciate that you've aligned with your purpose. I appreciate that you're helping other people by asking those questions and helping us see those parts of ourselves that are hurting or still seeking something that's not going to be fulfilled other than through God. So what other tools or resources would you share if somebody's looking, if something doesn't feel like it's going the direction they want it to go, or they're feeling like there's more? What are the resources you're going to push them towards, or what are your words of wisdom?
Out of the I think it says, out of the heart flow the issues of life, I think is the scripture, right? A proverb. And so I would say, when someone's in a situation where they're facing some resistance or stress, to go inside, and not the head, but the heart, because the heart will dictate and explain where the issues are at the root. And so one resource, I actually brought you a copy of it today. It's called Radical Healing. It's a book that my pastor wrote. And what's nice about it, it's really short. And each chapter has an activation where you actually go through understanding what are the issues of the heart. How do I replace those with the truth? Because that's the whole point, is to understand the lie, replace it with the truth in who you are and your identity. And then as the heart is more purified, then actually everything that gets created comes from that place. It doesn't come from external. You started to talk about that. It's an inside out job. Mm-hmm. And when the inside gets purified, then the external actions and things that are created are better, and they result in more love, joy, peace, all the things that everybody I've ever met wants more of.
Yeah, 100%. Well, and I would say that you've cultivated some really interesting resources through your career that you've helped us with, and like the CVI and different things that help you assess, and maybe people that haven't done Bible studies or haven't been into a church community where they're getting good discipleship or good teaching, they maybe haven't seen those resources as regularly as others. But I would say find a good church that's Bible believing, first and foremost, just to get that truth that you're talking about, so people can hear the truth of the things that God does say, and not from a religious standpoint, but from a factual standpoint, biblical. And then do some assessments. Like the CVI is a very good tool. I have our staff go through the CVI. They do, we use called the Working Genius for work, which helps them to see their skills at work, but then also an assessment on a personality test. So even like the Myers-Briggs, or there's other personality.
Finder.
The ones, and a lot of them are free, and they give you insights into why you do the things you do. And I appreciate the CVI because that's Core Values Index, which talks about your internal core values, what's meaningful to you and why. And then I think any of these resources that point us inward to look at ourselves helps us then go out and say, how do I fit into this world with more knowledge about ourselves, instead of who people have told us we are, or who they want us to be, or the different things that we've told ourselves based on not fitting in to certain surroundings that we're in. You also talked about that, which was intriguing to me, because you have traveled the world. You've been in different places because of your dad and the career he was in, the military, and you're in places that people dream of going, and a lot of places people will probably never go. Belgium and Paris and Germany and all these places that you've been allowed to go live and just be able to travel the world. But you said you didn't fit in. You're still going into a different culture, and I think anybody can understand that. But you said because of your color, and you're going to these places. You're going to Fort Huachuca, and you're going to New York, to West Point. You're going to these places in Europe, and there's not many people that look like you. And so you're walking into these environments trying to fit in. And I think that speaks to a lot of our own journeys individually, regardless of what color we are. We still walk into a room, or we're still in an environment, even at home or in our own families, where we look around and go, I don't fit in here. And I don't necessarily like what I'm hearing or what they're saying about me or to me. And I don't like the way that I think about this family or this environment that I'm in. And too many people I've seen in my lifetime, too many people that give into that, and they just accept that and don't fight it. And that's where I'm intrigued what kind of spurred you into that, because you still had those conversations and you still recognized it, and you didn't sell out some of your core, who you were. You stayed a believer and you stayed in your faith. So what, is there something about you or something different or something you would encourage others to say, this is what it was, or this is what it is?
Yeah, I would say before I discovered this, I was always chasing after, proving, and it didn't matter what I accomplished. I never had a sense of peace. Never had. That's why I never celebrated anything, because I never felt joy or peace. It was just move on to the thing, because I'm on the treadmill to prove that I'm good enough, right? What's different today is I have that internal peace. I'm very grounded and rooted in all things faith, right? Everything comes from the inside out. And so it doesn't matter what actually happens. I get to choose joy. That's what's different. Regardless of circumstances, I'm always choosing joy. I can accept things that I don't agree with and make the powerful choice to do what I want to do next, to create the path that I go down. You were talking about assessments. Recently, I took 14 assessments that I've taken across the years, and I put them into a custom chat GPT that's my brain. It's called the Big Homie Flow, which is me. And so what I do today when I have a challenge, I actually go confer with it and say, hey, how should I handle this challenge based on how I'm uniquely wired? And it'll show me something that I can't see, but honestly, I've never felt so seen and heard, because it's exactly how I'm wired. And it helps me to navigate day-to-day things based on me, which I think that's the key. Knowing your identity, knowing your strengths and your gifts and your passions, and making powerful choices from that place. Not what's expected, must do, should do, have to do externally, but really coming from within. I think that's the key that I've learned.
Yeah, that's important. And I love that, because as you know yourself, the good and the bad, the strengths and the weaknesses, whatever you want to call it, then you recognize, if you're willing to recognize what you can and can't do, your limitations. Absolutely. And then apply yourself in the areas that you can be successful. Because there's one you know, and there's other people with certain gifts that you share in common, and those are your people, you know. And the ones that don't have necessarily the same strengths that you do, they have their own strengths. And you have your blind spots, just like I do. I need those people in my life as well to help well-round my life, because I have areas I don't see. And so if I don't hear another perspective that's different than mine, I can go into this self-absorbed place thinking I have everything right, or what I'm doing is the best way. And I'm not looking at a viewpoint that might help me grow.
Absolutely.
And help others as well.
Mm-hmm. So, I have a good friend that says, the jam can't see the label from inside the jar. Right? So we're inside. It takes some external reflection, but we still have to do the work. The work can't come from other people. It's just a reflection back to us of what's going on. But it's always an inside job.
And it's your choice.
And it's
I love
choice.
that.
Yeah.
And that was the Viktor Frankl. He came to that conclusion back when he was in the Holocaust and he was in the concentration camp. Mm-hmm. And he wrote that the one thing they can't take from him was his choice of if he was going to be joyful or not joyful. That's right. Even under the circumstances, they couldn't take that. They could do everything they could to destroy him and to hurt him, but he still had a decision to make what his attitude was going to be like.
That's right.
And regardless, if we do the work internally, I think that's the key, is what are we choosing to do, and taking ownership and responsibility and coming to that place of self-acceptance and love. And I think it all flows from love, personally. Because if you don't have that self-love, then you don't see yourself with that value, and you don't see all those things.
That's right. And that self-love extends to what I call the good, the bad, and the ugly of yourself. And I learned recently that until we can learn to appreciate and accept the good, the bad, and the ugly, we're not totally free. Freedom is not hiding those two things that others don't, that you don't want people to see, and only showing one. That's actually prison, right? But accepting good, bad, and ugly, and accepting and making choices what to do with them, now a person is free, which freedom is one of my highest values.
I agree. I think that's huge. And I think that we need to have these conversations more.
That's right.
And it's what you said from the beginning of this, the discipleship aspect of just life and faith. It's what makes the young wise, and it makes the old wiser. Mm-hmm. It's investing in each other. It's learning from each other. But to do that, we have to be honest and real, and that takes time. Mm-hmm. And discipleship is an investment. You don't just come to knowledge and faith and wisdom in an instant. Mm-mm. It takes a lifetime to build. And
it's a journey, yeah.
I'm grateful that you have that and that you're doing it, and especially that you're willing to work with folks that conceivably people are intimidated by potentially the size of their bank accounts and the size of their companies and their holdings and what we would perceive as power. You're willing to work with folks and bring them back to that place of your internal core is what's most important, and being true to self, but also acknowledging self, the weaknesses, the strengths, and those longings and those desires that can never be fulfilled by anybody but yourself. And that's through a relationship with God.
100%.
And if Jesus isn't in there, then you're going to try to fill it with something else, and it ain't going to be good. There's not going to be an end result that you're going to appreciate. And others won't like it either.
That's right. Nobody wins.
And the people around you are a good reflection
Yes.
of where you're at.
That's right.
You know, what you're willing to accept from other people and tell yourself, that's a reflection of where you're at in your life. And hopefully people will hear this, that anybody that does hear it, they'll recognize that maybe they don't love themselves as much as they should, and then find the people around them or the resources that will help them on their journey of faith to find that true love. And that's what we all, I think, are longing for.
Absolutely. And if I was to leave with one thing for anybody watching, it would be to recognize what is the lying belief that's created your current reality. And again, it's I'm not something enough level, like If you can identify that, that starts the awareness, and then the resources will show up. But identifying that first, otherwise it's chasing after symptoms that will never get to the root. And that's what it is. It's a belief system.
That's your words of wisdom.
That's my word.
Parting words of wisdom.
Yes. Get to the root of the belief that's created today's reality.
That's excellent.
Replace it with the truth.
Love that. That's an amazing way to end our time together. And if anybody wants more resources or anything that you can potentially work with them, if they had that desire and wanted to, where would they go to find out information?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn at James F. Madison. My website is onpurpose-life.com. And those are two places that people could reach out to me and find out more about what I do.
It's a joy, James. Always a pleasure.
Thank
and
you.
I'm hoping if we can help some folks with just this conversation that we did some good today.
Yeah.
And we'll continue to do this thing going forward.
All right. If we help one person, our work is done.
Amen, brother.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Jim.
you.
Thank you for tuning in to The Stories That Bind Us, the show that honors the weight of being human and reminds us that we're not alone in carrying it. Today we had the blessing of being joined by James Madison of On Purpose Life. Cinematography was done by Michael Brown. Editing and narration was done by Jim Martin. The Stories That Bind Us was created and hosted by Jim Lee. We'll see you again next week, and until then, take care of yourself.